Think, think, thunk. Oh, the things you can think up. You can think up some birds, that's what you can do. You can think about yellow or think about blue. You can think about red, you can think about pink. You can think up a horse. Oh, the things you can think. You can think up black water. You can think up white sky. You can think up a boat. You can think of blues blowing by. Oh, the things you can think. Think of light, think of bright, think of stairs in the night. Think left and think right, think low and think high. Oh, the things you can think up, if only you try. Theodore Seuss Geisel, better known as Dr. Seuss, knew better than anyone the importance of teaching children to think and wonder at an early age. So this begs the question, is it children and what they can do that has changed over time, or is it something bigger? Within the span of the last 150 years, people have gone from living and dying within only a few miles of their birthplaces to being able to travel nearly anywhere in the world within less than a day. This has allowed people to form meaningful connections with environments otherwise unheard of. Now, however, people are able to do that within mere seconds. How? Because of two men you've likely never heard of before, Bob Kahn and Vince Cerf, the creators and founders of the HTTPS protocol, aka the internet. Now, 8 billion devices across all countries and continents are connected to one another by this invisible force. The internet has impacted nearly every single aspect of our environment. But now, people have begun wondering, how is this connectivity also changing them? The internet offers a wide variety of high-quantity outputs, all at varying levels of quality. In fact, the average American now spends approximately 7 hours a day online, as compared to only 24 years ago in 2000, where that average is only 1 hour. The internet provides better communication, access to education, and more opportunities for businesses and consumers alike. For better or for worse, it is undeniable that the internet has revolutionized the way people live and work by providing instant access to information regarding nearly any topic we can conceptualize. Whether or not the internet, or even this amount of internet consumption, is positive or negative is beyond the scope of this speech. We instead will focus on how internet media affects our ability to think critically. Before beginning, though, it's important to set definitions for these foundational terms. So, for the purposes of this speech, critical thinking will be defined by Webster as the active practice of applying reason or questioning assumptions in order to solve problems and evaluate biases. And internet media will be defined similarly as any and every form of broadcast piece of information available on the internet. This includes news sites, Wikipedia, social platforms, blogs, research databases, and the like. Now, the goal is to find how these two terms relate to one another, answering the question, is it important? Is it relevant? Or does it even matter? Many believe any change to meet the needs of the internet can simply be called an adaptive response to our environment, a form of human advancement, as such must definitively be good. Unfortunately, this argument fails to account for the changes being made, the hidden costs. If the internet forces its users to adapt in a manner that negatively impacts their ability to perform critical thought, then it will hinder human flourishing on the societal, spiritual, and physical levels. Damaging or losing the ability to think critically on such a macro scale will cause users to decline into a self-feeding loop of bad information, informing poor choices, leading to poor research being done, leading to bad conclusions, and in turn, causing more bad information to be put into the system. So, if there is a clash involving critical thinking in the internet, what then should be done about it? Should action be taken, and if so, to what extent? How should we think about critical thought? Is every internet media even worth critical thought, or should that only be reserved for these specifically academic sources? And moreover, is it simply too late to make the changes necessary? In an era of pervasive internet connectivity, combined with the constant influx of digital information, a concerning trend has emerged that must be addressed, that being the erosion of individual critical thought. This speech will explore how critical thought is degraded by the internet. It will accomplish this by first exploring the human condition, what information we look for, and how we interact with that information once we possess it. Then it'll pivot into a discussion on human cognition, how our brains are affected by this recently developed tool. Lastly, it will examine the effects of the internet on human psychology through a conversation on well-being, daily decision-making processes, and societal discourse. Guess it didn't get removed. Does not the ear test words as the tongue tastes food? Job 12:11. Somehow, I think God wants us to use what's in between, that being, of course, our brains. God has given us beautiful, wonderfully designed minds. In the Bible, words like understanding, wisdom, think, discernment, and knowledge appear more than 1,750 times, making it easy to infer that God desires his creation to use their minds to think and grow critically. In fact, in Philippians 4:8, Paul calls the people of Philippi to think on specific things when he states, "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence and if anything worthy of praise, think on these things." These final words, "think on these things," gave them and give us a clear and concise command. So first know what is true, honest, just, pure, lovely, of good report, virtuous, and praiseworthy, and then to meditate on that. This process of gathering information and drawing conclusions is the act of critical thinking. Taking it one step further, it was God's Son, Jesus, who was the first Christian critical thinker. His mental acuity was made abundantly clear in his various debates with scribes, Pharisees, and elders. He argued clearly, logically, and succinctly, and he entreats his followers to do the same. These leaders, the scribes, Pharisees, and elders, held the opinions and laws that were common for that time. But Jesus' actions, they counter those cultural norms. In the same way, Paul charges in Romans 12:2 to not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but rather be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Today, this challenges Christians to seek out renewal of their mind by exercising the same critical thought that Paul charged the Romans to use. Additionally, it charges them to be on guard, since we are told, "For a time will come when they," us, "will not endure sound doctrine, but having itching ears, they shall heap to themselves teachers in accordance with their own lusts." So, when we approach the internet, how are we users supposed to imitate Jesus? In this complex era of internet connectivity, users are constantly left standing at the crossroads of conflicting thoughts, concepts, and ideals, and they must decide how they will operate based on that. When someone searches for academic information, the scientific method provides a means of questioning and testing designed to gather information to either confirm or deny a theory or point of view one holds. In the realm of science, where objective fact trumps all, veering off this path is seen as contrary to the field itself, since it's only by this means of questioning and testing that the subjective can be avoided as a whole. While this practice is evident in science, it's entirely counterintuitive to exercise this thoroughness while using the internet. Likely because the internet produces seemingly polished conclusions so quickly. However, while seeking conclusions, people bring their own selection biases into the equation. All those politics, faiths, and cultural norms that people hold near and dear, and then seek out answers that confirm those beliefs. Dr. Crossan, in his book, The Suicide of Critical Thinking, asserts that human beings today gleefully but exclusively seek out only the evidence that confirms where they already sit. This is the human condition, that while seeking affirmation, individuals have a tendency to trade in that deep, questioning, critical thought process for the comfort of something that aligns with them personally. Furthermore, they often stand firm in their position, right or wrong, because of their ability to cite sources on the internet of others who think like them. Having discussed how internet users seek out information, it's time to turn to the troubling way some individuals use it. Because the internet is ever expanding and constantly changing, the vastness of it, for most, if not all people, can become so difficult to conquer. Dr. Alexander Plechner recognizes this, stating, according to Dunning and Kruger, people unskilled in certain domains suffer a dual burden. First, they reach erroneous conclusions and make unfortunate choices. And second, their incompetence robs them of the metacognitive ability to realize it. In other words, because they are incompetent, they are incapable of realizing their own incompetence. To put it differently, an individual only knows what they know, which that's a problem because according to Gladwell, it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert in anything. 10,000 hours, which most people simply do not have. And those that do are likely unwilling to give it to these smaller tasks. The internet circumvents this. It allows and even encourages others to be the experts for us. Using these experts isn't wrong. It's great that those are available. It's the only way that society can flourish. The issue arises, however, when one fails to take into account the quality of the information that they are consuming. This poor digital diet fosters an environment where critical thought cannot be nourished, leading users to holding wrong views, later make those unfortunate choices, and be unable to correct themselves. Now, though we have discussed the information people seek and how they behave when they receive that information, we must now address human cognition. Physical, technological advances changing the outlook of the worker is a story as old as time itself. Consider how the plow changed the outlook of the farmer. Suddenly, the 1 acre field, it could become 10. Then consider how the musket changed the outlook of the warrior on the front lines. No longer did he have to be at arm's length from his enemy to enforce his will. Then consider how the microscope changed the outlook of the scientists, opening entirely new worlds to be explored. It's clear, intellectual technologies have the greatest impact over what and how a person thinks. Pulitzer Prize nominee Nicholas Carr asserts that sometimes our tools do what we tell them to do. Other times, we must adapt ourselves to our tools' requirements. If the farmer, warrior, or scientist refused to be adapted to their physical technologies, their work would have remained primitive. They were reshaped willingly. For us, however, that freedom is not the case. Fast forward to the 21st century, and the internet is the new intellectual technology on the block, and it is rapidly changing us, the users. This has been easily observable in testing for quite some time. However, up until recently, it was thought to only be on the cognitive level. However, it runs much deeper than that. Recent developments have dispelled old theories, instead teaching us that the change is occurring in the microscopic structures of the brain, physically rewiring how one thinks. Meaning the brain isn't simply a fixed organ, but rather it's subject to change based on the environment it's placed in. This rewiring, or neuroplasticity as it's called, has allowed the internet to change users from rational, critical thinkers to shallow, fast-paced observers. Building off this, further research demonstrates just how impactful these changes are. To paraphrase Kepke Lowe, a pioneer in the realm of humanity's relation to the internet, people who use multiple forms of internet media devices within a short period of time exhibit reduced gray matter densities in the rostral ACC. That means that neurons that work to provide motivation, learning ability, decision-making, and emotion are becoming damaged, or worse yet, dying. Additionally, there's a reduced connection between the rostral ACC and the precuneus, the portion of your brain that handles complex functions such as memory. So, if the ACC handles learning, decision-making, emotion, and risk analysis, and then the precuneus handles self-processing and memory, then damaging and creating a division between the two affects your ability to engage in thought, critical thought, and then further affects it by limiting your ability to operate based off your prior experiences. This reduction in gray matter may sound light, but it's not, because on some level, it's happening to everyone. In reality, high gray matter densities are one of the most crucial requirements for us to maintain normal function. Now, to be clear, there are common conditions that cause reductions in gray matter densities like the one stated here, namely Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, traumatic brain injuries, MS, and oxygen deprivation, just to name a few. The same reduction in gray matter is how this intellectual tool, the internet, is changing us. I mean, it's ironic, really, that a tool designed to aid in our intellectual expansion is rapidly deteriorating the manner in which we are able to think about things. So, you might be asking yourself, Whit, what do these rapid developments in human cognition help us to better understand about ourselves? To answer this, we must discuss how the decline in critical thinking impacts the psychological well-being, daily decision-making processes, and ability to engage in societal discourse of internet users. A comprehensive study by Twenge and Campbell, published in the Journal of Abnormal Psychology, highlights a stark increase in depressive symptoms and loneliness coinciding with the rise of digital media. The research suggests that this uptick can be attributed to the internet's role in reducing face-to-face interactions and engendering a sense of social isolation. There is a direct association between the manner in which someone's thoughts are organized and the scale with which they are able to think about the issues presented to them. When mental well-being suffers, it's not an isolated event, but rather it permeates throughout the entirety of one's mind, changing how they not only view the world, but also themselves. This increase in depressive symptoms leads to a psychological event called a cognitive distortion, which are irrational thoughts influenced by emotion. Everyone experiences these to some degree, regardless of their mental state. However, this research strongly suggests that the advent of the internet significantly worsens this effect and drastically increases the likelihood of holding a negative cognitive distortion. Additionally, due to the mechanism by which it occurs, the barrier to receive outside help and influence is significantly raised, which makes cognitive distortions harder to spot, harder to treat, and eventually increases the degenerative qualities of them. Since mental well-being has such a strong correlation to how one's thoughts are organized, this lowers the capacity for someone to think critically. Building on the foundation of multimedia's consumption's impact on surface-level thinking, it's essential to consider how this affects our willingness to engage in deep, critical thought on a more individual level. The instant gratification and constant stimulation provided by the internet often diminishes the capacity for patience and reflections, which are, in case you didn't know, essential components for critical thinking. A study by Huberman and colleagues revealed a correlation between heavy social media use and reduced attention spans, which directly impedes the ability to process information deeply. A shift in attention span has the ability to affect academic performance, stymie personal growth by limiting exposure to diverse perspectives, and reduce the propensity of the user to question and analyze. This effect can be mitigated, though, through critically assessing the impact of digital consumption on a person's ability to focus, and in turn, opting to foster that balanced digital diet. Now, we've heard a lot of conversations about social media today, and those conversations typically revolve around its addictive nature, its potential for misinformation, and the like. This, however, fails to capture the scope of the issue, particularly in regards to long-term effects on the user, specifically in the realm of critical thinking. Alcott and Glenskow illustrates social media's role in shaping political beliefs and potentially fostering extremist ideologies through echo chambers and algorithmically curated content. This phenomenon leads to homogenization of thought, where dissenting opinions are treated as invisible, marginalized, or even combated. This environment challenges users to differentiate between biased narratives and factual information, and subsequently impacts their ability to engage in critical, independent, individual thought. So, on the other hand, many still assert that the internet assists in the ability to think critically. They believe that as users consume digital media, they receive access to an unprecedented range of views and opinions, which allows them to operate off of greater quantities of more diverse information. Which, that's true. You do receive a wider range of opinions while surfing the internet. However, the environment in which those are presented to us are rarely constructive. According to Paul Kishner, despite the fact that receiving minimal guidance while searching for information is very appealing, this approach ignores the evidence from many studies dating all the way back to the 1950s that demonstrates users acquire information with structure, guidance, and context to fully understand it. This means they require more than simple access to information provided by the internet, but rather instructional support from these sources to really address them with a nuanced critical thought process. Due to users lacking the guidance and structure necessary to think critically on this diverse portfolio of information presented to them, it not only becomes useless, but damaging. Because rather than feeding into a diverse perspective, as many might hope, lacking the frameworks to address what they are learning leads them to forming misconceptions, according to Eli Preisner. Additionally, many internet users still believe that they are significantly more capable than is actually true. They assert that evidences, such as the one provided by Carr earlier, that the internet inherently fosters a shallow means of thinking and discourages critical engagement with information, doesn't really apply to them specifically. This is where I believe most of us exist. Since this is their belief, they search the internet with their guard down. This belief is not only a logical fallacy, a special pleading, where one believes that they are exempt from a general rule without providing justification, but also unbiblical. By taking this stance, the user willfully forgoes the using actual knowledge, instead opting to operate off of their own personal folly, according to Proverbs. This personal exemption from general rules goes all the way back to the very first chapters of Genesis, where we see Adam and Eve in the garden thinking of themselves as an exception, choosing to eat from the forbidden fruit. It's human nature to want to think of yourself as an exception or as special. However, if everyone is an exception and everyone is special, then absolutely no one is. So, today we discussed a concerning trend that has emerged in this era of pervasive internet connectivity, the erosion of critical thought. We heard from Pulitzer Prize-nominated authors, leading doctors in the realm of neuroscience, and world-renowned scientists, all in the pursuit to answer this question. What's happening to the minds of those who use the internet? We first explored the human condition. We discussed what information people seek out and how they operate based off that information. Then we examined the human cognition, how internet users' minds are undergoing a physical change due to the information exposure. And lastly, we considered human psychology by discussing the well-being of internet users and how that relates specifically to critical thinking. So, if we go back to the question at the beginning of the speech, what bigger thing has changed? The internet. It reduces our ability to think critically and decreases our disposition to attempt the endeavor as a whole. So now, what should we do about it, if anything, and to what extent? If we think about critical thought the way that God does, then we hold it in high esteem. We understand its importance and its value. Because of the internet's pervasive tendency and the fact that it's not going where, coupled with how it is woven through our daily work and personal lives, there is absolutely at this point no way to cut it out, and nor should we want to. But we must guard our minds. Be cautious digital consumers. Approach the internet with a questioning disposition. Don't be an internet glutton. Oh, the things you can think up, if only you try. And please remember, my friends, your mind is a terrible thing to waste. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, in the back.
Again, I have two questions combined into one.
Okay, fantastic.
How do we counteract the negative effects of internet reliance in our day-to-day life? And what are some ways that we can start to encourage critical thinking?
Yeah, so the question was, how do we counteract the internet's negative effects in our day-to-day life? And what was the second one again? I'm so sorry.
And what are some ways that we can start to encourage critical thinking?
What are some ways? That's excellent. So as to the first question, how do we counteract the negative effects of the internet's effect on critical thinking in our day-to-day lives? The first thing we gotta do is choose to foster that balanced digital diet. If you look at your phone time or your screen time or your online time or whatever tracker you have, and it's saying, oh, you're spending 7 hours, but that's all on spreadsheets and various work tools, that's probably okay. But when it's saying, oh, you're spending all this time on Instagram, on BuzzFeed, on all these various sources that are really geared to numb the minds of the user, then we know that we aren't fostering that balanced digital diet. I think that answers the second question as well. Does that? Perfect. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah, so the question was, do we think that there's something specifically in the realm of education that should be done to alter how students engage in critical thought with the internet? So there's many ways that we can execute that concept. It's a great novel one. But the fact of the matter is, the internet is so pervasively available that there's absolutely no way to really see that through without the compliance of the user itself. The change can't happen on the rule or on the governing body level. It has to happen on the personal one. Any other questions? Aaron.
First of all, have you used AI to answer questions on homework, and do you think that's a risk that we're going to be facing in the future more and more?
The first question was, have I used an AI to answer questions on homework? Not really. I don't enjoy... Believe it or not, I don't particularly enjoy that. I feel like it really shoots yourself in the foot later down the road. It is a huge blessing to be able to come to a school where we get to engage in thought like PEP. And choosing to short that work in that manner, you're really just shorting yourself. What was the second question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you might answer it too, because it's like, is that a risk that's going to be future generations have to deal with that's going to kill critical thinking?
Well, Aaron, you're smart. You know the answer to that question. Of course. Any other questions? Bryson.
Someone was addicted to social media and it was changing their thought process. How would you talk to them, try to get them out of that?
Yeah, so the question was, if someone is addicted to social media, how would I address that in order to help pull them out of that? So as someone who used to be addicted to social media, what I did in my own personal life was I bricked my phone. This is what my phone looks like now. I have access to 5 things. That's it. Anything else I want to access takes so many hoops and jumps that it really just becomes a useless endeavor. But also from that, it has to happen on the personal level. I can go up to someone and I can say, this is hurting you, this is harming you, you need to get out. Your brain is physically dying. And if they don't care, they're not going to be able to do anything.